Hello, and welcome to the Sound Up Seattle podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Seattle and Washington sports. I'm your host, Tyler Cartwright, joined, as always, by my co-host,
John Carey.
And we are here today with... There's been some crazy Seattle sports news coming out in the last day. Perfect timing for us to get back to it. John, you had a nice vacation in Hawaii last week. Of course, our 22 YouTube subscribers had to be told that much as to the reason we didn't record last week. But it's a good week to be back. Good news. No, kind of good news. Exciting news for sure. And obviously some Mariners discussion, some Seahawks discussion, and some Kraken discussion, as well as other Seattle sports going on. So anything to say before we jump into a lot?
I'm so glad to be, refreshed. I'm browned by the sun, as you can tell.
It doesn't show on the camera.
Tanned up like a tangerine and ready for the stretch run here. So excited to dive in. Let's go.
Nice. All right, here is some Coyote Picnic. Oh, all right, John. What do you want to start with today? I think there's quite a bit of news. I think the first thing in my mind that we should start with is the Seahawks, because they did a lot over the last couple of days, and I think that is people are primed for that discussion.
Yeah, we got to start with the Seahawks. The potential dissolution of what was, one of the best three-man receiving corps in football. It could be almost completely gone next year with some big news on the Seattle front. So break down for us, T.
Yeah, so I believe it was yesterday that the Lockett news came out, or we kind of, the writing was on the wall when it comes to Tyler Lockett being released from the Seahawks this offseason. And it was, okay, never mind. It was March 5th is when the article actually came out. So today, as we record this on Wednesday, there was official news that the Seahawks released Tyler Lockett. A lot of that move was to clear cap space. I think his contract was worth $17 million, and he was going to be a over $30 million cap hit this season. And he's just, as a third receiver and an aging third receiver and a guy that the Seahawks didn't really see themselves building around and is, on an expiring contract, all this kind of stuff. They decided to release him. He's still going to take on 13 million, or the Seahawks are going to take on 14 million in salary hit. But that saves them, that $17 million that they were going to have to pay. So it's a big deal in terms of Tyler Lockett leaving, second most accolades, I guess, in terms of Seattle Seahawks wide receivers. He's a great Seattle guy. Really loved the city. Fans loved him. So sad to see him go, but it was definitely necessary for this team.
Yeah, writing on the wall, as you said, with this, Mike McDonald, more hard-nosed offense, they're going to be trying to put more money towards the running game and towards the offensive line. You can't afford a third receiver making that kind of money. And, you also just saw it in his production. He had that amazing, 5-year stretch breaking 1,000 yards from scrimmage from 2018 up through 2022. His yards dropped off significantly last year down to 800. And then down to 600, 800 2 years ago, and then 600 this last year. His touchdowns dropped from averaging about 10 per year for that stretch I was talking about, then 5 2 years ago and 2 last year. So you can just see these numbers dipping. I think JSN coming in and really taking a hold of that number 1/number 2 wide receiver position for the Hawks last year really cut into his production, because previously, he was right up there in the conversation for that number 2 spot. And as it became clear last year, okay, clearly he's our number 3 guy entering his age 33 season. We love him to death, but he's not the Lockett Rocket anymore. He's getting older. He's not quite as fast. I think it makes sense for this team to move on. So as you said, very sorry to see him go. He's a Seattle champion. Or I guess I'm sorry. No, he wasn't on that championship team, was he?
No.
He missed the 2013 Super Bowl, but made it to the Super Bowl in 2015 and had a great tenure with the team.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that the Seahawks fans really, really grew accustomed to, especially, the later years of Russell Wilson, where it was like the post-Doug Baldwin era. Like Tyler Lockett was the guy that stepped up and kind of became that number 1 target for a few years there for Russ. And I feel like, this is kind of the signal of that era being over. It was like, okay, Russ is gone. This one guy is still here. Bobby Wagner's gone. Like this was the guy from that. And now it's just like, all right, we're in our new era. Geno Smith is like, he's on an expiring contract this year. We'll see if the Seahawks end up giving him an extension. But at the end of the day, like this is a new and revamped Seahawks team from the last decade. And like, it's kind of like they're trying to figure out how to take a hold of this. And I guess we can take this into DK and DK requesting a trade, because that's another piece that like, the team of old is really just gone. Like that 2020 team, kind of the team that people are kind of remembering fondly from the last half decade. It's like that team is gone. Like it's a new team built around defense. It's a new team built around JSN. And then we'll see if Geno Smith stays around long term. But like this team's going to look very different in a couple of years, and it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and there's been whisperings about Geno potentially being moved this year too, so you just never know. That plays into what is definitely the biggest story of the week for the Seahawks, and that is that DK Metcalf, our star wide receiver 1/2, depends where you put him in JSN, has requested a trade. He wants out of Seattle. He said he wants to go to a contender. He's 27 years old. He's got one more year of team control on his extension from 2022, but then he becomes a free agent. So, he put the chips on the table and said, hey guys, you have me for one more year. I'd like to play this year on a contender, but go ahead and keep me and I'll, potentially walk away at the end of the year. So it's put a lot of pressure on the Hawks to move him this offseason. I think the odds are definitely that they will. It's a real bird in the hand, two in the bush situation of, one more year of one more year of DK is going to be great, but how does that compare to the value that you could get for him? And, he's still a super valuable guy. Any team that you trade him to, he's going to be signing an extension, I'm sure. So, his value is definitely up there as a, low tier wide receiver 1 or really high tier wide receiver 2. And I just think, there's going to be a good market for him. How do you feel about this in terms of positivity? Are you like, okay, let's roll with this punch? Or are you like, this is devastating?
Yeah. When it comes to DK, people love DK, and I can respect that for those people, but I've never been the biggest DK supporter. I think you and I both don't love his inability to run good routes. He's kind of more of a pure runner and go straight and hug it down the field to him if you can get open. But, I think looking at this, it's an opportunity for the Seahawks to try and get something more, like you were saying, try and get something more for a player that has significant value for a team trying to compete this season. I look at a team like the Bills, who need a good wide receiver and could really capitalize on a guy like DK with Josh Allen. Like that's a combo that I could see working really well.
That deep ball, yeah.
But like for me, I'm looking at this and I'm like, I don't want draft picks for the Seahawks. They have yet to prove to me, like they've used their first round draft picks pretty well, but they have yet to prove to me that they've made significant strides getting second and third round draft pick value that's like greater than what that is. So I really want them to go for like a younger, more established guy that a contending team is willing to get rid of and take that player and mold them into something as, maybe it could be part of this really good Mike McDonald defense or something like that. But that's kind of what I hope that they can do with DK. What I think that they will do is likely trade him for a couple draft picks and, get a third and a second rounder or something like that. Like that's really what DK calls for. And draft picks are pretty valuable in the NFL. So like he's not going to warrant a first round pick. At least unless it's a team that's like really trying to buy all in on him. But I think DK as a trade piece feels pretty high value, but when you really look at it, it's not that much. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think he'll go for a second or a third, but we will see. Yeah, you're correct. He's not. I don't think he's a first round value, especially with only 1 year team control. There's still a lot of teams out there that would like him, but it does cut in a little bit on your bargaining power when you only have 1 year control. So we'll see what kind of value they can get. Some of the teams we're hearing whispers about as potential suitors. The one that jumps out that I think is both the most realistic and the most unrealistic is the New England Patriots. Just in terms of they have a huge desire to get him on that roster. They need massive help at wide receiver.
As much help as they can get.
Yeah, if you're a skill position or an offensive lineman, if you play any offensive position that's not quarterback, the Patriots are looking for help.
My problem with that is like the Patriots are they closer to contending than the Seahawks are? Like, if DK wants to go to a quote-unquote contender, like, that's not where he would want to go.
100%. And that's why it's realistic but unrealistic, because I don't know why DK would say yes to that. Maybe the Pats would just say, we'll just take you for the year and try to convince you to stick around and play with Drake May. But that you're right. That's the team where it's like, okay, why would DK want to go there? But there's been a lot of Pat stuff, because especially with T. Higgins getting the franchise tag, there was tons of rumblings about them going after T. With him off the docket, they are thirsty to get a wide receiver one for Drake May to make some magic with. So that's one team to keep the eye on. You mentioned the Bills. I think that's a great one. Not sure what kind of value they could give back. I'm sure they wouldn't trade Coleman for him. So, just be a question of return. I think one team that is super interesting to me personally, and the reason is it checks all the boxes, and to your point, it's a team that you're getting assets as opposed to just picks, is the Green Bay Packers. The Packers are in a really interesting position where they are a really good contender. Obviously played some great football last year, but went like 1-5 against the rest of the NFC North last year. Almost all their losses were in division. So they do need to improve if they want to contend in that wood chipper division. And they're in a position where they have 5 wide receivers on that team that people like and are excited about. And they need to consolidate one way or another. If it's just moving on from guys, they can do that. But one thing that would make a lot of sense and, help them improve is package a couple of those guys and maybe a low round pick for DK Metcalf. So that'd be something like Romeo Doubs and Dontavian Wicks. Doubs a little more established, Wicks a little more of an X factor, but has really shown flashes. And then, maybe a 6th or 7th round pick for DK Metcalf. That helps the Packers improve and, clears up a bit of a log jam for them at wide receiver. And it helps the Seahawks get a couple young, talented receivers in the building and a tiny bit of draft capital on top. What do you think of that?
I don't hate that. In my mind, I was thinking that the Packers needed more receivers. Did you just put your hand up for some reason?
No, I was giving a boom.
The mic drop? I thought you were copying me because I put my hand up. No, I like that. I was thinking the Packers needed more, but then I realized it was the Jets. The Jets just lost Lazard and Adams.
Correct.
And so in that vein, it's like, you're getting 2 worse receivers, but established ones, and especially if you're losing Tyler Lockett, and you can fill those 2 spots with 2 new receivers and potentially get another one in this upcoming draft, in the later rounds. Seahawks, do not listen to this and think you need to take this in the first round. But in those later rounds, just like get another guy that can kind of fill one of those 2 roles in that way. I think Romeo Doubs is more of a Tyler Lockett type receiver. So if you can get the guy that can, kind of be the bully against a good DB, that would be a good spot to find somebody in. And I think that fits well. I think DK would like to play with Jordan Love as a new quarterback in a place that has a really good established offensive line. That's like the kind of place that DK would thrive, is somewhere with an offensive line that actually gives him time to break away and separate from defenders. So I see that working out really well as well.
Yeah, so we'll see. There are a lot of options out there, a lot of contenders. Obviously, the Chiefs need help at wide receiver too. I don't know what they could possibly give us, but who doesn't want a piece of DK? And yeah, I guess just going back to the positivity thing, pardon. I feel really good about this. I'd prefer if their hands weren't forced and he didn't request the trade. But we talked about before, DK coming up on his last year of this extension. He's got to be paid, basically top tier wide receiver money.
Which I hate. That doesn't make any sense to me, but
it's so tough. There are those guys in the NFL that they're good enough that they need that money, but you're like, he's not, obviously not a Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase type. So I would rather move on from him, recoup some good capital, and then go try to find one of those true number ones, So yeah, we'll see how this works out, but I think it has the chance to be a net positive for the Seahawks that DK requested this trade.
Here's a couple options. I'm just gonna throw at you and see how you handle them. DK going to the Raiders, rekindling his friendship with Pete Carroll, who I know loved him, and going to a team that is in desperate need of just like an X factor offensively, and I think we'll probably sign a QB and just try and be at least relevant this upcoming season with Brock Bowers and the way that their team's constructed. Like they just need to establish themselves, get 8 wins. It's not necessarily a contender, but it's a team that I think DK would have an immediate impact on. And there's also, I'm thinking of like the Chargers, who really have lacked quality receivers the entire time Justin Herbert's been there. That would be a good option for them. Same with a team like the Jags and Trevor Lawrence. I don't know if he's a sunk cost at this point, but Trevor Lawrence is a guy that like people still have a lot of faith in. And I think as a team, the Jags really have a lot of room to improve, especially offensively, and DK could provide that. The Niners just lost Deebo Samuel. There's so many teams. Granted, we don't want to send him to the Niners, but like I'm giving you, there's all these teams that are just like working and trying to get wide receivers, and DK could fit a lot of those spots, and we could get a lot of good capital from that.
Yeah, and this goes to your point that like even though there's only 1 year team control, there are so many teams looking for that next wide receiver that Hawks still have pretty good leverage, I think, to get a good haul on the return here. I'll just work backwards, rapid fire to those potentials. Niners, no way they're trading him in division. Yeah. And I don't think they can afford him. Part of the reason they moved on from Deebo is they just need to get cheaper on offense so they can spread a little bit more money around to various positions. So I don't think they're looking to make a big, expensive signing. But you're right, he would fit there. Jags, it's interesting. I just think him and Brian Thomas Jr. play too similarly.
That's fair.
Thomas Jr. is another big-bodied, vertical guy. He's kind of just like DK, but better in a lot of ways, honestly.
To me, that's a team that's actually really reminiscent of where the Seahawks were at a couple years ago. It's like they made the playoffs and then got eliminated. They took a bigger step back than the Seahawks did, but it's like that team theoretically is right on the cusp still of like being in the playoffs and contending in a way that the Seahawks aren't, where the Jags are in more, they're more into a rebuild, and the Seahawks are kind of deciding what they want to do right now.
Yeah. I just think Trevor Lawrence, he's not that much of a down the field guy that you'd want to pair 2 big bodied down the field receivers. That's more of a Josh Allen type offense, I think, with BTJ and DK on the field. Chargers, I think, is really interesting. I think Chargers is a great call. That would be a great fit. Contender, desperate for a wide receiver 1. I mean, everybody was blown away by, what's his name? Their wide receiver out of Georgia.
Ladd McConkey. I thought you were talking about Quentin Johnson. It's like nobody was blown away by that guy.
No. We were blown away by how bad Quentin Johnson was. But yeah, Ladd McConkey was a massive standout at wide receiver for them, but they still need, I think, a true number 1. So DK makes a ton of sense on that Chargers team. So that'd be an interesting one to look at. Raiders, I don't know why DK would want that. That's similar to New England, where it's why would he want to go there? I'd rather go to New England, where at least you have a stud at QB that can huck the ball deep. So I think the Raiders are maybe the least realistic, and then maybe Niners after that. But yeah, Chargers are really good. I think Bills is very interesting.
Another thought, the Chargers just released Joey Bosa, so it's like the Chargers just freed up some money.
freed up space. And, knowing Harbaugh, I wouldn't be surprised if he wants to spread that money to 3 middle-aged running backs. Yep. But I think that would be, in terms of football, that would be a great move, and it would be a big stock booster both for DK and for Justin Herbert.
For sure.
So whenever you see that happen, it's a good fit.
Yep. All right. Other than that, I think we can touch on real quick the other guys that the Seahawks released. They cleared up another $27 million in cap space by releasing outside linebacker Draymond Jones, defensive tackle Roy Robertson-Harris, safety Rayshon Jenkins, and swing tackle George Fant. Fant had not played a lot. Draymond Jones has been kind of on and off the field over the last couple seasons. He was a big signing a couple years ago and just hasn't been able to stay 100% healthy. Rayshon Jenkins, there was some news earlier this offseason about him requesting to seek a trade or a new deal, and so that's kind of like they just ended up releasing him, clearing some cap space, letting him find a new situation. And then defensive tackle Roy Robertson-Harris, not much else to say there. He's just, he's a guy that they had to cut as well salary-wise, deep into his career, and it's just kind of at the point where they don't need to be paying a guy like that kind of money. So a lot of veteran guys. We will see what they do with this money. They're clearing up a lot of cap space. They've got a lot of room to work, and there's not a ton of like really like big name free agents I think that are left. And so I think what they're going to try and do is really piece together both this offensive line and this defense, and then they're going to try and make a couple hits in the draft in terms of a receiver and another couple of offensive linemen, things of that nature that people can slot in pretty quickly in the draft, and kind of try and accelerate this rebuild is what I see them doing.
Yeah. And, credit to the Chicago Bears. They've been doing, they've done in one offseason what the Hawks haven't been able to do in the last 10 off seasons, which is just go and trade for like 3 good offensive linemen. It's crazy today. One after another. They just made 3 trades for 3 starting caliber offensive linemen, including 2 previous All-Pros.
Yeah.
So credit to Chicago, but that also has really cut into the offensive line market in terms of trades. Yeah, it's a bummer for Seattle, because I know they were hoping to maybe make some moves up front. Makes you wonder if maybe they're just thinking about potentially, selling and trying to do the true rebuild. That hasn't necessarily been the way in Seattle previously, but yeah, I'm not sure especially if they get assets for DK, draft assets. What are they really going to have to put together a contending offense? I guess we'll see what Mike and the staff do, but I'm not against the idea of kind of pulling the plug and thinking long-term here.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to that, I think in my mind, this Seahawks team, they need to figure out, do they want to give Geno Smith more money? Like, are they all in on this Geno Smith 2-3 year period that we're looking at, or are they ready to rebuild? And if we see them, not pay a ton of free agents in this in the rest of this offseason and rebuilding in that way, I think they sit on Geno for 1 year. It sucks to send Geno off with a kind of crappy team, but with that being the case, I think it's the best spot for the Seahawks to just kind of sell it for a year and rebuild, recoup, and come back in next year with a very rejuvenated roster and start looking at new quarterbacks and things of that nature.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, it'll be very interesting. The Hawks have made this offseason. I feel like this this offseason in general has been very exciting in football. There's been a lot of movement early. So it'll be really interesting to see, how things shake out come preseason. But yeah, pretty crazy that 2 of the 3 heads that was the Hawks receiving core could be gone next year, and they were both under contract. So wild stuff.
Yeah. The Seahawks team's going to look very interesting this season, I'm sure. Okay, where do you want to jump to next? I think there's a couple things we could talk about when it comes to the Mariners. There's, the Kraken trade. Actually, no, let's jump to the Kraken trade. I think we should talk about that next. Getting all the trade and movement discussion through the window first.
Yeah, and before we jump into the trade stuff, I want you to walk us through your experience. You got your face cold, you went out to the ice, you saw the skates, you saw the puck, and you came back with some thoughts.
I saw the puck go into the Kraken's goal 7 times. That's what I saw. Yes, I went to the tough. Kraken versus the St. Louis Blues. A fun game to watch, but not necessarily as a Kraken fan. Yeah, the Kraken gave up 7 straight goals, I believe, and then scored 2, or maybe it was 6, and then scored 2 in kind of garbage time where it didn't really matter that much. Man, watching this team, this is something that I don't know if you've ever experienced, or when before the Cubs really had their run of greatness in those like mid 2010s years, but it's like I've never really watched a team or remembered watching a team that just sucked. Like the Mariners were bad for the last 25 years. But I don't remember that. That was like the experience of watching the Mariners was like young middle school and high school Tyler, like not really able to fully comprehend when a team is bad. And I think you can kind of see that in the NBA sometimes where a team is tanking to tank and things like that. But the Kraken, watching that team try and play against this Blues team, the Blues looked exponentially better than the Kraken did. The Kraken had basically no real offensive strategy. Their entire goal, for the duration of the game was just kind of hit the puck up and hope that it got past a Blues defender, and then you could kind of get a garbage goal in that way. They didn't look like they had any sort of offensive game plan. The Blues, they were, they controlled the puck off on the offensive side of the ice, and then they would throw a guy in front of the Kraken goalie and block his vision, make it tough. And like the Kraken just had no ability to do that, and I don't know why. I don't know how the players what players need to be able to do what and things like that. I'm not a hockey expert, but the Kraken just looked horrendous. And yeah, the offense just wasn't able to get anything going. Their 2 goals they scored, like I said, were just kind of garbage time. Nobody was on the ice for the Blues either, so it was atrocious.
Yeah. What would be interesting to think about is, because, the Hawks have never really gone in on the let's completely tank and rebuild thing. They've always, they're always winning, 4, 5, 6 games. They're not a 1, 2, 3 win team. And the Mariners, even during the doldrums, even during that, 22-year playoff cold streak, they're putting up a lot of, 70, 80, 90 win game seasons. I'm curious if this Kraken team this year, where it would rank of the worst Seattle sports teams in its, given sport over the last 2 decades, because I think it might be right down there near the bottom because, it is truly uncompetitive. They continue to drop in the standings. They continue to drop in the advanced statistics. It's just not working.
Yeah, and this can jump into the discussion about the trade because it's not working and nobody has really known what their goal is for this season. And at the onset of the season, everybody was like, this Kraken team doesn't seem like they have a direction. They don't seem like they know what they want to do with their picks, with their team, how they're going to get everything constructed. And this trade, so I think let's break it down now. The Kraken today, it was quite the trade, actually. There's a lot of moving pieces, but the main pieces are the Kraken traded Yanni Gourde and Oliver Bjorkstrand, 2 of you and I's favorite players in terms of watching, and probably a lot of fans' favorite players. They traded those 2 to the Tampa Bay Lightning for basically 2 first-round picks in 2026 and 2027. And then there's some extra pieces that are moving around, but those are kind of the highlights. What were your thoughts immediately?
My thoughts immediately were holy cow. 1, this is a really big trade for both teams. And 2, gosh, what incredible value for the Kraken. And thank goodness that the Kraken are finally making this decision. Yeah. So, first and foremost, know when you're beaten and know when to turn assets into value. That's a lesson the Phoenix Suns desperately need to learn right now. As their locker room allegedly turns into the 7th layer of hell, and they refuse to move on from any of these guys. But it's sad for sure. Bjorkstrand and Gourde were 2 huge parts of that really fun team we had in 22-23 that, won a couple playoff rounds and looked interesting there for a minute. But at the same time, both of them are getting older. We can talk through their stats here a little bit. And to get the value they got in return, I thought was phenomenal.
Yeah, I think one thing to note is those 2 first-round picks are protected. So if they're in the top 10, they go down to like the 2028 and 2029 third-round picks. So we want the Lightning to actually do mediumly well over the next couple of years. We don't just want them to tank because they will get those picks back and we'll get third-round picks instead. So that's something to note. But yeah, my gut reaction was like, Gourde and Bjorkstrand. I just remember Bjorkstrand having such an amazing series against that was the Avalanche that we played and beat in the playoffs, that first series. I remember him having a great series and just being kind of a big threat offensively, and he really just has been consistent over the last few years. And Gourde's a guy who's returning to the Lightning. He won 2 Stanley Cup finals with them, so just like a guy who is getting the opportunity to return home and actually compete for this season, which is nice. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of the trade, though, because the Kraken needed a rebuild. They just need to take a step back and be like, okay, we are not the Las Vegas Golden Knights. We're not going to compete for a Stanley Cup final this year. We didn't build it right. We didn't allocate our money the right way. Like, this is the time to figure it out. We're going to be a bottom 5 team for the next year or 2. Like, we can figure this out, get good draft picks, and move on. It was an exciting first few seasons for the Kraken as an organization, but we'll see where they go from here for sure.
Yeah, one pretty significant correction there in terms of what the trade is. So top 10 protected on both picks. That does not mean they would turn into thirds if it's in the top 10. That means they would turn into first-round picks in the subsequent years, and the team would acquire an additional third if that happens. So potentially it's even, depending on if you want a really high pick or if you want more picks, I'm not going to pretend to be a NHL draft expert enough to really gauge the value of a third round pick. But it could be as many as 4 picks if both 2026 and 2027 picks do fall into the top 10. It would be a 2028 first and third and a 2029 first and third in that scenario. So 2 first round picks guaranteed. But if they hit the lottery on the first attempt, we'll have to try again in a year.
Gotcha. I didn't realize that it was a deferred pick. I thought it was just they pushed it back to the
and dropped
round.
it to a third. That would be brutal.
Yeah.
That would be brutal. No. And so, to your point, the picks could diminish in value, but we will either have, 2 high-end picks, or we will have, 2 mid picks and 2 thirds.
Which is interesting in terms of looking at the Kraken rebuild. It's like that could decelerate the rebuild by a couple of years, which would be pretty devastating.
Yeah, we will see. But in terms of these 2 guys, I just want to shout them both out. Great love for both of them. Our offense is going to take a hit. Bjorkstrand, our starting right wing, and Gord, our starting center. Or I should say our second line center. But Bjorkstrand's 29, played most of his career. Who is CBJ? Columbus Blue Jackets. Goodness gracious. Played most of his career with the Columbus Blue Jackets, but, kind of peaked as he was coming to Seattle. Scored a total of 57, 45, 59 points the last 3 years. And in this year, has dropped off pretty significantly. He's at 37 points so far. The season's not over, but he's not on point to hit any of those numbers this year in his age 29 season. So if you're asking me, a pretty good time to turn him into a first-round pick. And Gord, much the same story. He's 33, so even older.
He also just had that injury that he came back from at the beginning of it was the beginning of this month or January?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But his numbers have dropped really significantly in the last 2 years. He was 48 total points in back-to-back seasons. By the way, did I say goals for Bjorkstrand? I meant points.
Yeah, no, you said points. Assists.
You were good. Okay, good. Gord had 48 points in his first 2 seasons with the Kraken before dropping to 33 last year in 80 games played, so plenty of games, but just not getting a lot of points. And it's at 17 this year. There's been some injury stuff. He's only played 36 games, but the numbers haven't been great. He's trending in the wrong direction. He's 33. I'm not surprised Tampa wants him back. He played his first 7 years with Tampa Bay and was there for their back-to-back Stanley Cup championships. So kind of it's like the Warriors bringing Andre Iguodala back into the tent. He's going to be a great culture fit and everything there. But I'm a little surprised that these 2 guys with a combined age of 62 and statistics that are pointing in the wrong direction carry the weight of 2 first-round picks. I'm a little surprised by that, but I'm happy to receive it. Yeah,
Tampa Bay's been pretty aggressive over the last couple of years. Their GM has just made some big moves basically every single year since 2023. Surprising to see the Kraken let these 2 guys go and get that kind of value for them. But the Lightning, in that sense, have been pretty willing to part with pieces and kind of do what. I don't know. I don't want to call the Lightning the Lakers, but it's like the Lakers never have draft picks. They just trade and get players and
Sure.
build off their roster. So in that way, the Lightning are just like kind of restocking their roster with good guys. And after this year, they might end up being a little worse and end up being more like the Rams actually of 2020.
Yeah, I was thinking Rams. I was thinking a little Ramsey in their desire to move off from picks to try to contend in the short term. Which shout out to the Rams. They won a Super Bowl. yeah. There's nothing wrong with pushing all your chips into the middle, but you got to really hope you win it. Tampa Bay's in a good position. They're 36, 21, and 4, third in the Atlantic Division. Only 3 points out of first place, though, so they're right there in contention. So maybe this will push them over the edge. It'll be fun to see those 2 guys go on and win a Stanley Cup. Obviously, there would be no ill feelings from anybody in Seattle to see those 2 have success. A big trade, and one that I'm very excited for.
Yeah. Yep. I'm excited for this. I'm excited for this Kraken season to end, is what I will say. I think it's time for this one to we move on from that. We forget about it. The 2024-2025 season did not happen, and the Kraken will be better next year.
We have even less to pay attention to now that two of our favorites are off the team. So, we'll see what kind of Kraken content y'all get for the rest of 2025.
Yep. All right. Anything else to say before we move into what was an interesting article that came from the U.S. Today? Are you ready to talk about that?
Yeah, let's get into the M's.
All right. As you can hear the cat playing with something in the background, we'll see. But
roam free.
So today the Mariners, the U.S. Today, is that like a news company? I don't really know what U.S. Today is, whether it's like news or just like, it was weird because it came from Bob Nightingale, but I didn't realize he was a U.S. Today guy.
USA Today is news.
But he dropped an article about how basically all of the players on the Mariners roster were like, what is this ownership team doing? Or ownership group doing for this Mariners team? Not even, they all kind of understand how baseball, how the money moves around in baseball and things like that. And they're understanding like Jerry Dipoto is doing what he can with what he is given, which was interesting in terms of how the article was phrased. It was like, hey, none of this is Jerry Dipoto's fault. This is like the restraints that have been put on him by ownership. So just, we don't have to really belabor that topic, but it was interesting to see Justin Turner coming in as like the main headline of that article being like, yeah, I would have definitely gone back to the Mariners if they had offered me any sort of deal that was like worthy. And he also, like, him and a couple of the Mariners players and a couple of different people were just talking about how this Mariners team is poised to win a World Series with this pitching staff. And it's like, this is players saying these things. These people know what is going on and they can see this, and it makes it, even further proves that these players know what's going on and that they don't want to come to Seattle if they know that this is how the team is operating. So it's a scathing article, and really just makes, as a Mariners fan, me just like not excited for the next couple of seasons of us trying to recruit good, talented free agents because they just won't pay anybody.
Yeah, the idea of baseball's a little broken, and I wish they would change the system. Maybe they will if the sport continues to lose money, but they aren't doing a very good job of trying to help parity in the sport at all. And it allows cheap owners like the ones in Seattle to get off doing stuff like this. And, I thought one of the best parts of that article, and just speaks to kind of the desensitization of Mariners fans, is just that, like, this pitching staff is amazing, and everybody knows that it's amazing. And everybody saw how awful this offense was last year and how many wins it cost us. And everybody went into this offseason being like, there is a huge gaping hole on this team's offense. They need to address it. And there were 3 monster free agents that would fit positional needs for this team. Those being Pete Alonso, Juan Soto, and Alex Bregman. And the Mariners didn't even pursue any of them.
They didn't make him an offer. They were like, hey, even $20 million a year for 10 years.
Correct.
They didn't even make him an offer.
There was no offer. There was no pursuit. There were no whispers. There weren't even rumors linking any of those guys to the Mariners, which is just sad. And I thought that was a really good point of just like, they were there. The free agents were there. Other teams go out and get these guys. The Mariners do not. Yeah,
and I'm not going to be one of those people that's like, oh, the Mariners are saving for Vladimir Guerrero Jr., but it's like, there are people out there that are like, oh, those guys were out of the Mariners bracket and they're hoping to get Vladimir Guerrero Jr. after this season. And it's like, if you're a baseball team, if you are running a baseball team and you want to make money, jump on this now. Like, if you're trying to save money to be able to pay your players next year, because next year they're going to have to pay Logan Gilbert an extra $20 million. Like, that's just, that's money that's gone out the window. And if you're worried about that now, don't be a baseball owner, because you have to understand that if you invest that future $20 million, you will net so much more. If you make it to the second or third round of the playoffs, like, the people will be so much more reinvested in this team if you drop that $20 million now for Alex Bregman. Like, that's all they had to do was pay Alex Bregman $25 million for 3 years. And it was like, nope, we can't do that. We can't even make him an offer.
Yeah, it's pathetic. It's sad. It's sad. It was scathing. It's tough hearing it come out of players' mouths. It's just one more line of reinforcement that, no, we're not crazy. Yes, this is happening. But what are we going to do? Find the Mariners owners' home addresses and come to their houses and throw bags of poop at their windows until they decide to make better decisions? That would be illegal. It would be illegal to to slash their tires until they start spending more money on this team. Don't do that. But we'll figure something out.
Yeah, we'll tell all the Mariners fans on Twitter. We'll talk into their echo chamber about how boycotting these games is going to happen. That is the one thing that I know will not happen.
Yeah, just wait till it's a nice spring day and you want to have a beer.
I know
just
it's impossible to not go to a baseball game. Anyways, anything else to say about that article before I have a couple more Mariners things to rattle off?
No, rattle them.
All right. So since we last talked, which again was 2 weeks ago, so you've probably already heard the news. You've probably seen these guys at spring training and everything. But the Mariners signed first baseman / DH Rowdy Tellez, who has played on the Brewers the last couple of years, to a minor league deal. They also signed reliever Trevor Gott. They returned him from, he was on the team a couple of years ago, but just another guy who's a fastball slider combo that the Mariners, pursued a couple of years ago, and I'm sure that they like him for the same reasons now. Looking at those two additions, I think they are depth pieces that will be sitting in the AAA, the Rainiers bench, basically. That's their plan for those two guys. And if it comes down to it and Donovan Solano is not performing and having that kind of acquired free agent season that the Mariners keep having, then Rowdy Tellez will come up and be a backup first baseman and DH and do all those things. They're basically just... One thing that we were clamoring for was some more depth for the Major League roster, and they did add these pieces, but they are old and not necessarily the kind of depth that we want. We wanted the players that we acquired to be the depth, and that is not what happened.
Correct.
But in general, I'm not upset about these moves. Rowdy Tellez is a fun guy. He's a good personality to have around the clubhouse and things like that. I think spring training has definitely been... seeming to look very fun for the team, and everybody's popping off. Julio, I think, had 2 home runs today, which was cool to see him get cooking. But yeah, everything else from spring training, I've been enjoying following along, but in terms of like the pitching and who these guys are facing, it's so hard to validate any sort of stats that come out of it in terms of sample size and in terms of, the Mariners played the Royals today, and I'm sure the Royals pitched 7 different guys, and 2 of them are major league caliber pitchers. It's like... There's not much value to be gleaned from spring training stats. Yeah,
we beat the Dodgers 11-5 and lost to the White Sox 18-9. So go ahead and throw it out with the bathwater. M's are 5-8 through 13 preseason games. Julio did have 2 dingers today, but they amounted for 2 RBI because none of his hitters are capable of getting on base. It's going to be a ghost of Christmas future for the entire season, I suspect.
Don't say that, man. Don't get too negative before the season even starts.
This is why I drink at the games. I would just have a root beer if they could put a decent offense together, but instead I have to have 4 Bodhisattvas to make it tolerable.
No, the one thing that I am excited for, and we'll probably, just so you guys know, we're going to do a Mariners over-under podcast sometime in the future. We'll do some predictions, talk about this upcoming season, but before we do that, I want to talk about one player real quick and just get your thoughts. Victor Robles. He's going to be our leadoff hitter starting the season. Do you think he's projected? So he had 3.1 WAR last year by Fangraphs, so F4. He's projected for like 2.3, and he only played in half the games last year. So he's projected to have a really steep drop-off this upcoming season. Where do you think he falls?
Yeah, it's just bullshit. Like... why they would project a drop-off for a young player, moving into a bigger role on a team where he excelled last year. It just doesn't make a ton of sense. So he's also not like a sophomore where you're expecting the slump. He's got experience. So, I'm expecting him to have an awesome year. I think 3.1 WAR was amazing. he was incredibly effective.
And basically half a season. Like that's crazy numbers from him.
Yeah, so maybe part of it is they're just saying like, hey, there's going to be some regression, and I get that. But I'm expecting very big things from him, and do we need big things from him. I would love for him to be hanging around the 300 average mark this year, like he was able to last year. It would mean just a massive amount for this offense to be able to get leadoff hitters on base. If he's hanging around that mark, and if he's doing what he was able to do defensively and, with his legs, I could easily see him getting to or exceeding 3.1 WAR this year. Yeah, considering how much more season he has, I think that's very possible. Yeah,
I'm in full agreement. I think the thing that goes undervalued for Victor Robles is his... I think pressure is probably a good way to put it. Just like him getting on base and creating pressure for pitchers in a sense of he can steal second, he can steal third, but he's also just like bouncing around, drawing the attention away from the hitter. And it just makes it so Julio will have much easier at bats compared to when JP was batting .215 last year and unable to do anything. So it's
he's my favorite kind of base stealer, which is like, he affects pitchers psychologically because he's just so bouncy. Shohei's like the opposite. Pitchers like don't even care about Shohei because he's completely still and then he steals and it's done. And, like, pitchers just like don't even think about it. Robles is just like bouncing left, right, constantly in people's heads. So I do like that about him.
Yeah. So I think he's primed to have a really good season, and I think something we haven't talked about much this offseason is the addition of Edgar as a hitting coach. I think these guys have really, really latched onto him as a guy who's hit before at T-Mobile and in Seattle, and has shown that ability to just like have an impact on the game, and didn't necessarily hit a ton of home runs. Edgar was such a huge doubles guy when he was playing in the majors, and it was like, that's what made him a good hitter at T-Mobile. It was like he would just push the ball the other way into the gaps, not trying to be a pull hitter and pull the ball down the line and hit home runs, because that's just not what happens in Seattle. So I think that's really exciting for me to look forward and look at that coming into, looking at these spring training games and seeing how these guys approach the each pitch, and then also coming into the start of the season, seeing how they've adjusted and their different approach to the game.
Yeah, we've talked about that. I would be very excited to see some of these guys be a little less home run thirsty. There are those guys I want swinging like that, Cal and Julio maybe being the only real names on the roster that I really want swinging like that. Even a guy like Randy Arozarena, I would appreciate if he really focused on getting the ball in play, because T-Mobile's not a hitter-friendly park. So focus on what you can do, and let's try to get a lot of guys on base and score runs, generate runs in that way. I think that would be more effective. So I hope you're right. I hope Edgar can impart some wisdom to these boys.
Yeah. All right, that is going to do it for the Mariners, and then we've got a lot of other stuff going on for Seattle sports. Do you want to touch on those over the next couple minutes?
Yeah, let's start with a quick note on a Storm acquisition. The Storm signed Katie Lou Samuelson. She plays forward, and she's small forward specifically, and she's joining the team. 27 years old, 6'3", talented player. She's, a depth piece, but her numbers are good. Her statistics basically climbed every single year, peaking in 2022 where she was averaging 10 points a game on, 35% three-point shooting, then missed all of 2023 with maternity leave and, had a decent year last year with Indiana. She kind of bounced back, but, she's still, coming back from maternity leave. Obviously, that's a big change, but I expect her numbers to bounce back up closer to her pre-leave numbers this next year. And if she can, just be an effective three-point shooting forward for us, that's a depth piece that is always good to have.
Yeah, if she can come in and play that 3-4 position as, Nyeka and Ezzy and who's that third piece? Gabby Williams. As they all rotate in, she can kind of be that fourth piece and come in, play the 3 when they have 2 of those people on the court, play the 4 when they only have 1 and they're getting some rest in. It's just like she's a nice addition to this team in terms of adding depth at the forward spot. So I really like the signing, and it's only 1 year, so it's nothing too crazy. And it's kind of a gap bridger, like we've said. They want to get whatever piece that they get in this draft. She's definitely going to be somebody that will be able to add immediately to this team, and Katie is going to be just a nice mentor for them. If they end up going with Kiki, that'd be a great spot to have Katie in as well.
Yeah, UConn girl, so Paige.
There you go, little little mentorship there.
Yeah, maybe keeping the doors open. All right, that's it on the Storm. Just a nice little acquisition. And then major thing I want to touch on is the ups and downs, the travails, if you will, of the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Boy, they make it hard. They make it hard to love them sometimes. They had a very disappointing loss to St. Mary's almost 2 weeks ago now, 74-67 loss. It's a game where they decided to start Joe Few on senior night. They put the coach's son out.
Why did they do that?
Yeah, they started him on senior night, and in the 2 minutes that he started the game, St. Mary's built a 9-0 lead. They ended up winning by 7. So you go ahead and make your decision on whether or not that was smart to play Joe Few for 2 minutes, in which St. Mary's built a 9-0 lead, but it happened. Offense, again, struggled. St. Mary's plays slow, and they play defensive. They played well. Yeah, 3-point shooting was tough. Hickman was 2 for 7. Classic big game Hickman, not really showing up. Graham Ike was solid. Probably the only guy I can really say that about. But it was just very disappointing. They out-rebounded us. They out-physicaled us. And it was a big win for them. They're going to lock up the WCC this year and have swept Gonzaga for the first time in, I think, at least probably 10 years or something like that. So congratulations to them. And that sucked. And because of it, I was ready. I was ready to be like, okay, this Zag team clearly doesn't have it. 2 shots at St. Mary's. What are we doing? Let's throw in the towel. They follow that up these last 2 weeks with back-to-back games against the second and third best team in the WCC. I should say the third and fourth. Gonzaga's number 2, but against Santa Clara and San Francisco. And both were massively decisive wins. They beat Santa Clara by 19 and they beat San Francisco by 20. They were almost identical box scores, 95-76 and 95-75. Offense looked great. Caliph Battle was awesome in both games. Graham Ike was awesome in both games. The second game was just the all-time Ben Gregg game. And you know what? We actually fixed it. We fixed it. We realized we'd been saying the Gregissance for so long. For Ben Gregg, thinking that was really going to catch on. And we realized, me and a buddy, before the San Francisco game, it's the Benaissance. What were we thinking?
Yeah.
Of course it's the Benaissance. And that game, he dropped 23 on 3 of 7 from 3. So we're like, okay, it's the Benaissance now. Both were great wins. And it's like, okay, this team's back on track to get, potentially a 6, 7, 8 seed if they can win the WCC tournament. Next game coming up is tournament game. It's going to be huge. Going to be very interesting to see how they do. But yeah, up and down. Hard to make any decisions.
Yeah, this Zags team, I'm going to go on the record right now and say I'm officially out on Graham Ike. At this point, I just don't like. He does some really great things offensively, but the play style that he and Ryan, I don't know if it's Ryan Nemhard as well that I should be out on, but the play style that he and Ryan Nemhard have just fully diverted from how Gonzaga used to play. And it was, even when they had bigs, it was like a fast big, ball handling big, like a Drew Timme guy, or somebody who could stretch the floor, and they could play quickly. And it's just, Graham Ike just like slows the game down to the St. Mary's pace, and they're so malleable in a bad way where they don't want to play at the pace that Gonzaga plays at. They want to play at whatever pace that the other team gives them. And so sometimes that can lead to really fast games where Gonzaga is able to score a bunch, when a team tries to score with them. But anytime they play a slow team, it feels like this Gonzaga team cannot put the numbers up because they're just running it through Graham Ike and letting him do his thing. And I'm just out on him. I'm sure he'll be good somewhere in terms of, a good solid G League piece, but that's my 2 cents. I don't think that he is the Drew Timme of this year, and he's not going to carry them to, a top Sweet 16 finish or anything like that. I would be shocked at the moment if the Zags made the Sweet 16.
Well, yeah, I think I would be too. But I think they have the talent to get there. It's just about putting it together.
Yeah.
I will say, I think I'm less cold on Ike. The dude is a massively efficient scorer. I heard a pretty wild stat that he's going to break Timme and Sabonis's record. Those are top 2 in Gonzaga history for points per minute. So obviously it's a combination of, qualifying minutes, obviously, not guys that play 1 minute and hit a 3, but qualifying minutes, guys that just are able to put the ball in the basket a lot in a short amount of time. He's not, an all-time scorer, but he only plays 20 minutes a game. Ike plays almost always 20 minutes a game. He's averaging like 22 points a game. So he's just crazy efficient scoring in his time. It can definitely bog us down offensively sometimes, but it can also, carry us at times. Like in the Santa Clara game, it was just so clear that him and Nemhard were just making beautiful music. And then they were also letting other guys get involved. That's the key. That's what's really important. So, a very interesting thing on that front is, Graham Ike has 1 more year of eligibility, and he did not start on senior night.
He's probably coming back.
Me and my brother were talking about it. It's like, if he doesn't come back, then that was like a huge slap in the face. Gonzaga always starts its seniors on senior night. or guys that they know are leaving.
They will start the seniors that have like been with the program and don't play. So it's like they know that Graham Ike is going to come into this game. So I'm sure that they would rather start a backup center and let him do his thing for a minute or two. But I see what you're talking about.
Assuming that he's coming back. But they started Chet on senior night when they knew Chet was going to leave. Like they always start their best players who are leaving the program. It's more than senior night. It's like goodbye night is what it is. So the fact that he wasn't starting makes me very confident that him and Few probably have a conversation where it's like, yeah, I'm coming back. Don't start me on senior night. Yeah, get Joe Few in there. That'll work out great. Hopefully it's not a big game against St. Mary's.
I want to look at Graham Ike's plus minus. Do you know if there's a college basketball plus minus?
I'm sure. Just plus minus on the court, I'm sure it's good. His career plus minus.
I want to know where the minutes go and when this team struggles. Like I don't really know who it is that is causing this team to slow down. Maybe it's Braden Huff, like in his inability to be super efficient. I don't know.
I think the team struggles when him and Nemhard are off the court. And I think the team struggles when him and Nemhard get two in their thing. But the team's at its best when Nemhard and Ike are playing and when the offense is clicking, which is most of the time. So I'm sure his plus minus is fantastic. Anyway, just something to note. The only other thing I wanted to say, the Santa Clara game was certainly going to be remembered if the San Francisco game is the Renaissance game where we finally fixed Ben Gregg. The Santa Clara game was the coming out party for Ismael Diagne. Ismael. Or it's Ismaela, isn't it? Ismaela Diagne. Our backup center. He has played very spot minutes this season, but he is, a big, powerful, certainly talented player. 7 foot, 237 pounds out of Senegal. And we've been looking for opportunities for him. Few, not typically kind to centers that can't play offense and, handle the ball or be comfortable with the ball in their hands. But he's seen enough that he got almost 20 minutes to run against Santa Clara, and he was awesome. He had 9 points, 4 for 4 shooting, but that's not what he was out there for. He had 4 rebounds and was dominant defensively, completely changed that side of the court with his ability to be a true NBA-style rim protector with his size and length. He had 3 blocks, altered a ton of possessions, really just looked like a man amongst boys out there on that side of the ball. And it was a revelation. It's like, holy cow, how is this guy not playing 20 minutes a game every single game? So naturally, Few played him for 5 minutes against San Francisco, and he didn't really do anything. So classic Few, giving us a taste and not the whole thing, but it does make me very excited to potentially see more of him this season and to see a lot more of him in the years to come. Nice. Yeah, I think the Zags, I'm trying to figure out if I should be excited about them or not. I think college basketball right now is just so weird. Like, when we have our March Madness episode, we're going to be so lost, man. We're not going to have any idea who's going to be winning those games. So it's going to be interesting in terms of just the college basketball sphere, I think. And in that way, Gonzaga does have a chance to actually make a splash, but we'll see what happens there. Yeah, I would love to be surprised. I mean, they are, it's just so funny. I've, haven't gone to Gonzaga. My brother and sister both went to Gonzaga. I'm just surrounded by Zags everywhere. And this team is the perfect combination of man, they are so frustrating this year, but clearly very, very good. I'm not confident at all that they're going to make a Sweet 16, but I also feel so bad for the 3 or the 4 seed that looks across at, 8 seed Gonzaga. That's just it's a bad beat. Yeah. It would be a bad beat for anybody to get a team this good that has lost every game, it seems, that they've lost by 2 or 3 points to, some of the best teams in the sport. Nobody wants them as their 10 seed. So, we'll get to see how that all shakes out in the coming weeks. For sure. One thing that I do want to touch on, UW women's basketball. UW women's basketball just won their first game in their Big Ten tournament, and they are actually looking like they should be able to make the March Madness tournament. So that's exciting for them. Really good season from Ladine. And just a couple good players have been around for this UW team, and they are returning next year. I was looking at their roster, and it looks like they've got a lot of good pieces sticking around. So exciting for this UW basketball team, actually. And I think, they just beat Minnesota today,
and they will play Michigan tomorrow morning. So when this gets released, they'll be probably just playing Michigan or about to start. So just a fun season for them, and I'm excited for them to make the tournament. UW men, not so much. They're down 35-47 as we record this at halftime to USC, who is 4-16 in Big Ten play. So that only goes to show how good this UW basketball team is. But yeah, I think we can talk about Wazoo if we want to, but I don't think there's too much to say about them either. They won't make the tournament or anything like that unless they can pull a WCC championship out of their butts. But I would think that they will have a fun tournament. That's what I'll say.
It's been a kind of a wake-up call, WCC play for the Cougars. It wasn't going to be the cakewalk. Maybe they were suspecting that it would be. So, tough season for them, but it is what it is sometimes.
All right. Let me make sure I've got our checklist. I think we hit everything. Are we good? Did we do it
I think
exactly an hour, basically?
How do we do this, man?
You did talk about Gonzaga for approximately 18 minutes, so
Was that all?
You can never get enough.
I'm a good monologuer.
All right. Well, for John Carey, I'm Tyler Cartwright, and this has been the Sound Up Seattle podcast. If you enjoyed this episode of Sound Up Seattle, please feel free to give us a follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. If you're watching us on video on YouTube, you can subscribe there and like, comment, do all that good stuff. You can find Sound Up Seattle on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, all at Sound Up Seattle, all lowercase, all one word, as John is just statue still right now. I thought he was frozen for a second.
Just locking in, baby.
You can email us your questions, comments, or concerns at soundupseattle@gmail.com. And you can find John.
I've been watching a lot of Marvel movies recently.
Oh, back on the grind.
The glory days. Well, yeah, but none of the new ones.
Did you watch the Brave New World one, and then you were like, man, I got to go back to the glory days?
No. I listened to a video spearing Brave New World, and I'm like, you know what? I kind of just want to watch Ultron right now. And it was pretty good. So, yeah, original Marvel movies still slapping after all these years.
Nice. I'm excited. I'm in the middle of rewatching the entire Infinity Saga, and I'm just so excited for the Infinity War Endgame. And Infinity War is my favorite Marvel movie, so I have to have fun with it.
I rewatched both of those, and when I first saw both of them, I was like, well, Endgame is clearly the better movie. And as time goes by, clearly not the case. Infinity War is far and away the superior
It's so
film.
good. It's so good.
Yeah, it's very, very, very good.
And I forgot to talk about myself. I did that out of order, but I'm Tyler. You can find me at TyCard50 everywhere it's important. And I guess with all that being said, let's go Nerds, baby. Season's about to start.
Let's go Hawks. Big moves, baby.
What is going on?
Is he just zooming around?
I think it's Camille opening something. What are you doing? Hey, what are you doing over there?
I'm sorry.
You're being loud as fuck.
I'm just opening my candy. Sorry.
Unbelievable. Keep that in. The people need to know.
I'm done.
You're good.